Hi, Lou here, and I'm going to talk about an aspect of role-playing game design, whether to use a class system or a classless system. And this is just an overview. I'm not going into great details. So first I need to tell you what these two systems are. Dungeons & Dragons and many other RPGs use a class-based system to determine a character's abilities. So each class, which is roughly a discipline or profession, broadly constrains what the character can be and do. So a cleric or priest, for example, can use divine-based spells, while a mage cannot. But the cleric might have to worship a particular god or pantheon of gods. And there will be other classes, such as fighters, that cannot use spells at all, or can only use spells when they get to quite high levels. On the other hand, in a classless system, every character chooses from the same pool of skills and abilities. And skills have a cost or level limitation. You might go up a level and then you can choose 2 more skills. And the highest level skill you may be able to pick is a second level skill, something like that. Some skills may render other skills unusable. For example, if you learn to wear heavy armor, that may prevent you from using certain spells unless you remove the armor. But in general, you have a broad choice of abilities. Now this can make for highly differentiated characters. Each one would be unique, with many paths for growth. Now, what are the many pros and cons involved here? A class system reduces the choices available to a player once he or she has selected a profession. And the individual professions may require certain ability numbers to qualify, so a particular character may not even be able to be some of the professions or classes. Now this is both good and bad depending on your point of view. Classes may make the GM's job slightly easier because things are organized into clear groups. On the other hand, contemporaries, typical players, don't like constraints, and classes have lots of constraints that are still there to some extent in a classless system, but are not so readily apparent. Possibly a classless system is simpler to design, but might be more difficult to implement in a well-balanced way. Classes encourage people to make up more classes, which can result in more publisher income, but it means there are even more things the GM may have to keep track of, and so forth. The classless system makes for a shorter rules manual, because all you've got to do is list the skills and what their level or cost is. As I said, the interaction of the abilities may make classless systems a little harder to balance, especially if you start adding more abilities in supplements to the original rules. The classes system is simpler for the players. Once they pick a class, they can read about it and they know exactly what they can do and what they can't do. Now, because Dungeons & Dragons is the 800-pound gorilla of RPGs, players are more accustomed to class systems because that's what's used in D&D. And Pathfinder, which derives from D&D, also uses classes. So the two most popular systems use classes. A classless system allows character growth better than the straitjackets of character classes. You can react to change your character as it grows in ways an individual class might not allow. So I probably could think of a lot more pros and cons, but I think this is sufficient to give you an idea of what might strike your fancy better if you're only familiar with one of these systems and not the other. My experience is I have always played a class system, and I've made up a number of classes, and I quite enjoy it. But in the only RPG I've designed, which is intended for use with a board game, so simplicity is paramount, I use a classless system because I think it's simpler. For a bigger game such as D&D, Multiple classes help provide both differentiation and opportunities for cooperation in combined arms that won't be as clear in a classless system. Now, whether you need a dozen or more classes in a class-based system is open to question. And of course, typically we end up with dozens, not just a dozen, because people keep making up more character classes. So if there's an answer to the question which is better, it depends on what you want to do and on what you like. Thanks for listening.